It's not simple. It is a process. Trauma can change the character of who you are. Hi, welcome back to whatever this is. My name is Kaysa. I'm online, and today I just wanted to actually do what I've been trying to do for weeks now. I wanted to make a video on Arcane for the longest time based on how it made me feel, my thoughts, the usual reason why anyone would want to make a video for any reason. However, I kept hitting the same wall over and over again. And part of the reasons why I made a couple of other videos is because it was easier to make those videos and faster than to do what I wanted to do with this video. That same day that I had recorded my last video and recorded an Arcane video. And I was halfway through editing it. Well, I wasn't even halfway through editing it. I was actually halfway through cutting it down. It was 40 minutes of me going on and on trying to talk about each and every character and essentially give my thoughts on every character. But I don't think I want to do a deep dive analysis. First of all, it kind of reminds me of back in college when I had to do projects, and book reports and deep dive analyses are amazing. However, I don't think that's what I actually want to do because I don't think it would be beneficial for my viewership to watch me go on a deep dive of a show that they can go watch for themselves. I am not one of those commentary sort of channels that are ahead of the game. I am very far behind. So a lot of the times those film reviews and show reviews are great because they are at the moment getting it done, talking about it so that people can find the entertainment and value from that. And as you can tell, I'm doing things that I have watched a long time ago and or watched way after everyone already watched it. So there's no point in me giving a whole recap of what the show is or what the movie is that I want to talk about. I should just get to the point of what I actually want to talk about. And of course, that's a long intro to say that when it comes to Arcane, I just wanted to talk about trauma, specifically generational trauma and cycles, because that's the one thing that actually the characters tend to deal with throughout the entire show. And this show sort of deals with it differently than I have seen in any other animated show for people that are children specifically. So the way that Arcane presented trauma and generational trauma, which is very interesting to me, especially since it was amongst a more female character cast in this regard, is how it interacts in the way that they live out their daily lives. For example, they were very self aware of the sort of trauma that had happened to them, and the way that they had managed it throughout the entire show was to then essentially inflict it on themselves or others even more. And I feel like Arcane captures the bleeding heart or bleeding on other people sort of feel a lot more than any other show that I've seen for this realm of, entertainment without also making that the central point of the show. It takes the generational trauma and cycles and it puts it within the plot and makes it actual a feasible element to what the characters' motivations are throughout the entire show, while also making them human at the same time because they're both self-aware and they grow and they develop a long time. Jinx is a central point to the trauma of a lot of people, which is how she got her name. And, if you haven't watched the show, honestly, you should just go ahead and watch the show. You can get better context. Jinx is almost essentially, I don't want to just say like Jinx is a Jinx, but she is a ripple effect. And her ripple effect affects all the other characters around her, especially in the area that she is in, even though she's not the main character of the show. And in a world where it is subjective who the heroes and villains are, objectively there are no heroes or villains. There's no main characters or anything like that. These are just groups of people interacting with each other, dealing with the dynamics of the socioeconomic situation that they're in, and then also magic as well. So politics and magic, essentially. When it speaks about trauma, I have had a I guess you could say I have had a small view on what that word actually meant growing up. And that's something that, you have to take time to process and digest, especially if you've ever had traumas of different calibers. Because that's the one thing I didn't understand as a kid, that I thought trauma was like a huge, big, obvious thing. Essentially, like if someone was, I don't know, like stabbed, and then I would be like, all right, that is trauma. But someone had a bruise, then my brain was like, that's not trauma. But trauma is a spectrum with a different level of degree on how it affects people and what their actions do from then on, and also has a lot of depth. And the reason why I want to bring this up, because obviously the characters were traumatized right then and there, right in front of them, but also at the same time, they're having a generational trauma or cycle that didn't necessarily come from blood relations, but it comes from the family dynamics that they come from, which is a very strong motivator within the show. It's one of those things where it makes me really reflect and realize that how often that happens in daily life, and then no one is able to fully deal with it. And on social media, especially during, my generation, I was born in 98. So millennials and zoomers, generation Y and Z or whatever, there has been more attention on things like mental health and generational trauma, and I've seen it as a cycle continuously, um, especially in the Black community as well, when it comes from, and this is where I tie in the fact of a woman cast mainly full of women, is that it's primarily like what I've seen from mothers and daughters, where they're in a generational cycle of trauma that they keep inflicting on their child, and then it happens again because the child grows up with this impression that that's how life is supposed to be, and they don't exactly break that trauma, so they end up bleeding on their own daughters, and it keeps going, that level of trauma and toxicity, until someone realizes this is very much not okay. And a lot of the reasons why they'll realize this is very much not okay is because they are put in a completely different context, or they're put in a position to have to be aware enough that this is not okay, and then also have to want for it to stop. Because generational trauma needs awareness. You need to be aware that this is a cycle that continues forward. And you need to be aware that you have been traumatized, and that has to be something that has to be healed and dealt with and processed in its own different way. Now, Arcane, I'm not going to sit here and say either the ending of the show or the way the characters reacted in any sort of way was appropriate, or how you end generational cycles. I'm not even saying that they're calling it generational cycles. I'm just connecting the fact that that is a element to how they grew up and how they are reacting in the world now. I would actually argue that despite the fact that they are aware that they have been traumatized and they have been in pain, they still keep repeating those cycles. Vi is a great example where she says she keeps making the same wrong decisions. And then Caitlyn is like, yeah, you're getting predictable. And then, but Caitlyn herself is also stuck on some traumas that only Vi can break her out of in this case. Like there's a lot of different things going on here. I think that's just the best way of putting it. Even when Jinx tried to break her own cycle and it had to be Echo to stop her, like she repeatedly was over it, sort of situation. So very much trying to dance around the block, because I don't know who's seen what at any point. I don't know. But out of the two seasons, I think it was a masterful way to show the effects of mental health and trauma and generational cycles without making that be a central point. Because it's not like a psychiatrist or, internal narrator was explaining all these different things while I was running that, like writing it down. It's more like they was just implemented in their characters and the decisions that they make. That's what most films and shows typically try to do. But I feel like this one did it more in a realistic way because of the way the characters turned out and how it unfolded over the course of the show. Now, there obviously were men there too. You have Echo, you have Jace, Victor. Those were the main male characters besides Vander and Silco. Vander and Silco, I am arguing, are the ones who started the generational trauma with Vi and Jinx in the first place because of whatever their relationship was and how that turned out. And is the driving force of the plot and how things turned out as well. You could arguably blame them for how everything turned out in the first place for both Vi and Jinx. And then you have Victor and Jace as well. They're I'll be fully transparent. It I am not what is the best way to put it without trying to spoil it. I do not think that Victor and Jace haven't faced any forms of trauma. I'll start there. They have faced various forms of trauma. Both of them have, and they process it differently. And how they both process it is probably my main problem. But it is what it is. And it's very interesting how that all unfolds as well. But the thing with generational trauma, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm some psychiatrist who can give you a solution to it, besides what I said about awareness and wanting to break that cycle, is the fact that no character had the time or capacity to try to figure out how to heal on their own. Every character needed someone else to be there as an element to their healing or processing, or which is coping with it. And I think in society now, we are dealing with a lot of that, but the way that we're coping, which is different than, or maybe different, I don't know how your life is, but maybe different than what they do in the show, is that it's so less active. I feel as though in Arcane, they're able to fight for their lives. They're able to interact. They're able to talk, fight, kill. They'll do all of it, right? For the sake of action. But in our lives now, where we have a lot of generational trauma, what I've noticed is people just distancing themselves. Therapy, sure, try to process it that way, try to heal. They'll try to ignore it, avoid it, pretend like it's not there in the first place. Or with trauma, a lot of the times, a lot of people don't even realize that's happening. And the reason why that I think the characters in the show are aware of their traumas is because of how quickly the traumas are building up no matter what. Well, that sort of sucks. For whatever reason, my PC just glitched and then everything got all messed up in the midst of me making my point. I don't know where I even left off. Arcane is a great show, but it made me come to realize how much action we don't actually take in regards to our trauma, how much we just accept the trauma as it is and don't do anything about it. And this is very loose because, again, trauma comes to its own degree on how it reacts within the body, how people process it, what they do with it, how people change because of it. People do change about the various things that happen to them in their lives. And I'm starting to also realize that I didn't understand the role that trauma played until, well, Arcane gracefully illustrated for me. I did understand how much trauma can, play a role in how you are as a person. But again, like I said before, I thought trauma had to be a significantly large condition. It can't, trauma can be small pieces that build up over time to be something large. Like your body can only take so much. And, I thought people had to go through what the Joker had to go through.
Remembering's dangerous. I find the past such a worrying, anxious place. Yes, memory's so treacherous. One moment you're lost in a carnival of delights, childhood aromas, the flashing neon of puberty, all that sentimental candy floss. the next, it takes you somewhere you don't want to be. Somewhere dark and cold, filled with the damp, ambiguous shapes of things you'd rather forget. Memories can be vile, repulsive little brutes. Like children, no? But can we live without them? Memories are what our reason is based on. If we deny them, we deny reason itself. Although, what's wrong with that, really? It's not like we're contractually tied down to rationality. There is no sanity clause. So when you find yourself locked onto an unpleasant train of thought, headed for places in your past where the screaming is unavoidable, remember this. There's always madness.
But at this point, I'm starting to understand that that's just not the case. That's just not how it works. Obviously, everybody has their own versions of trauma and how they process it and what it means to be traumatized because it's an individual take. One person's trauma may be another person's, stub toe or something like that. It is not the same mind, body, consciously, and all of that as well. Emotionally, especially, it is not all the same. And I believe there is research that says like the body does hold on to trauma in various different ways because a lot of trauma comes with stress as well. So stress can be held within the body and how you react to something because your body learns along the way. So if it's traumatized in one scenario and then you get back to that scenario or something seems similar, it will just get to the same level of stress as again because I haven't figured out what to do in that situation, how to survive. So you're just going to be stressed out in that same environment no matter what unless you figure out how to process change, deal with it head on. And again, I just feel like a lot of people nowadays, we are kind of split. And I feel like some people understand that they've been traumatized and will do something to try to heal from it. And I feel like the other half, or maybe even the great majority of people, just don't understand. Like, I didn't fully understand before what trauma actually is and how it can change you as a person, self-aware or not. Pick a character. You can pick Caitlyn at the very beginning of the show, and I guess you could say at the end of the show, she is, giving all benefits of the doubt, here for justice, here for actually helping people. But she got traumatized a little too many times, and you know what? She changed. She changed a lot. And without trying to give away anything about her character in the show, she does some pretty off character things because of the trauma that she went through. But we have to acknowledge that she's been traumatized to a degree, albeit it was pretty extreme in the ways that she was traumatized. No, she wasn't tortured or anything like that, but the levels and how quickly she's been traumatized in such a short period of time really just shows that you can change a character. And then, like I said, sometimes in Arcane, or a lot of times in the Arcane, it required another person's presence to change that response to help process or just give any sort of light to it. Vi shows up, and then Caitlyn is back to being Caitlyn sort of situation. And I think in a time period where, I mean, let's be fully honest, a lot of us are a lot more either alone or just in our own heads or just not willing to open up to somebody honestly. And I say that too because a lot of people can also not open up fully to their psychiatrist or therapist, and even then maybe the psychiatrist or therapist may not be able to help. And I say this as a person who is currently in therapy, just regular therapy, because it's probably good, but that doesn't help entirely, not all forms of standard healing methods work for everybody. Sometimes there just are other ways. I know people get into breath work, and I do exercise, and either just playing video games as a stress reliever and thinking about things, and art and drawing expression as forms of helping to deal with healing and drama and all of that stuff. So I just find it interesting the state that we are in now, that still I would say a lot of people don't understand that they have had trauma inflicted upon them and that they still don't know what it is or how to process it, and it has fundamentally changed their character, but of course they can't see it, and I wouldn't be able to see it either. to be honest, too, because if you're looking, from the inside out, it's hard to see from the outside in. So I do get it, but there is a level of awareness that you have been harmed. Things are different, and a lot of people won't take the time to actually explore that. And I think, at least for myself, I have been trying to deal with the traumas I have in the past. This is not going to be like a whole like I've been traumatized to such degree. I am not trying to make that sort of video. It's just more like a reflection of like watching this show and just also realizing just in my own life and what I've seen around me, all the different ways that trauma has played a role in everyday actions. And maybe it's also because for years I've worked in customer service where people who have trauma and just a good amount of trauma will bleed on you. I've had some really long tough conversations before where people are giving me their whole life story, which is far worse than what I've ever had to deal with, and I just had to sit on the other side and listen. And I worked on the floor, work over the phone, worked since I was 16 in this customer service position essentially, and various ones. I have not been with the same job for a decade, but also dawning on me, I guess, just now, how much of a how much of a burden it is to listen to that and have someone put that on you and then you can't do anything about it because I'm not a social worker. I don't play that role of support like that in life. And I just wonder what the answer would be for someone with trauma and how they should deal with it. But like I said, with Arcane, you can see they can do something about it a lot more. Obviously, it's a fictional world. They do have laws, but it's loose to some degree. They're already at war with each other. Yeah, that's my thoughts on Trauma and Arcane. It's a good show. You should watch it. You should really watch it. A lot of trauma, a lot of plot, a lot of things going on. But hopefully, I didn't go over. These are my thoughts. I just feel like I just want to just put it out there. Just like trauma is not simple. It is something that comes on a spectrum with depth and in various degrees, and it's individual to the person, and not every form of trauma is dealt with the same way. You may need to go to the gym and do Pilates for like several months and work that out of your system, and then do journaling for a couple of years, and then also yell in the woods. I don't know. It's not simple. It is a process. Trauma can change the character of who you are, as well as it is your life. Trauma affects your very life, the journey you are on in life. This is not something that you can just save up and put to the side. It is there with you to the day you die, whether you deal with it or not, actually. So I feel like it's something we should take into consideration a lot more, if you can. But again, trauma is a very sensitive situation, and you never know what is going to happen to you, which is the other problem. It's probably happened to most people and don't even know. But with all that being said, thank you for taking the time to watch me talk about Arcane and trauma. Hopefully, I will get this video out today. And give me your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. I don't know. Trauma. Did you watch Arcane? I was trying not to spoil it. I don't know. I might have spoiled it.